If pro is the opposite of con, what is the opposite of progress? It is Congress. I'm proud to finally reform a broken system and affirm today's resolution. Congress's pay should be tied to their performance. A delight to debate Zoe, who I've faced many times throughout the season. Her parents are here also, and they're fantastic people. My wife is filming. This is going to be a great round. I also know that at some point you were president or captain, I think, the MTSU team, so thanks for doing that. I'm looking forward to your feedback. This is going to be a debate weighed on net benefits, clearly. There is a policy resolution, and because it's a policy resolution, I'm going to give you three contentions. First, about problems in the status quo. Second, about my plan to fix them. And then third, the benefits that will come from fixing these problems. Let's begin with contention one. Congress is not doing its job. Again, Congress is not doing its job. Right now, senators earn $174,000 every single year, despite the fact that they have 15% approval per the Pew Research Institute, despite the fact they are down on passing laws from 336 in the last Congress to 274 in the current Congress, and decreasing even further. There is no consequence for ineffectiveness. Meanwhile, during the government shutdowns that are the result of this paralyzed, polarized Congress, hundreds of thousands of employees, per Reuters, are furloughed on work without pay. Delays in Social Security. Veterans not getting their benefits. We don't have food and health safety specialists. We have TSA lines that in some places of the country, like Atlanta, were 4.5 hours out the door because TSA was not calling in. Instead, they were leaving 40 to 50% of the time because they weren't getting paid. This is a disaster. It is not what Ben Franklin and the founders would have wanted to have happen. So what do we do about it? Contention two, fix the pay problem. Again, fix the pay problem. The affirmative proposes tying 50% of congressional paychecks to passing funding on time and avoiding government shutdowns longer than 72 hours. This is based on California, which passed Prop 25, saying that you would forfeit your salary and expenses until they pass a budget bill. The study of office accountability in the UK, looking at over 1,400 offices, found a 21% increase in productivity when systems like this, group-based incentive pay based on outcomes, are applied. So you put half their salaries in escrow, and they get it when they pass the budget or they avoid those government shutdowns. What happened in California? Before, they never hit their government deadlines from 1980 to 2010, and now they haven't missed it for the last 16 years. This works in one of the largest, most diverse states in the country. Contention three, stop the pain of shutdowns. Again, stop the pain of shutdowns. The Congressional Budget Office details how terrible it is when any shutdowns happen. The one that happened in the first Trump presidency delayed $18 billion in compensation and cost $3 billion to permanently come out of the GDP we have not gotten it back. The current government shutdown, we've already lost $14 billion from top-line GDP. Good workers not getting paid, 600,000 workers not getting the pay they need, the AF solves. Stop the wait times of 4.5 hours at TSA. Stop Joshua trees getting chopped down because nobody's working at the national parks because they're not getting paid. Have the USDA actually be able to investigate and approve things like home loans, and help the 6.3 million per month of SNAP benefits going out, which are delayed on government shutdowns. There's been 22 government shutdowns. We are still in a government shutdown. It is time to shut down this broken system by finally doing what one of the states has done, what the UK study says will work, and tying this so that their pay is tied to their performance. Open for cross.
All right, I've got 2 minutes. Judge, are you ready?
Yes.
And Ian.
Yes, sir.
All right, 2 minutes on the clock. 2 minutes on the clock, starting now. All right, just some quick clarification about this plan. I want to make sure I got it right. So you're saying you get 50% of their current salary is just automatic. They get that.
Yes.
And then 50% is tied to the government shutdowns.
Yes.
Specifically, they have to have ended the government shutdown within 72 hours.
Yes, and they also have to pass their funding budgets on time, and specifically, they have to propose an initial budget on April 15th, but the final budget has to go through on October 1st. That's what the current statute is.
Okay.
If they fail to meet the deadline, they don't get that pay.
Okay, And so, just to be clear, their current base pay is $174,000.
That's right.
So they'll still get, if my math is correct, $87,000 of that.
Yes, of course, they live in DC, which is an incredibly expensive state.
Sure.
They have a strong incentive to get their pay.
Okay, and then what would you say is the root cause of government shutdowns?
One of the root causes is congressional polarization. Another cause is the lack of, the change towards more sunshine laws, so we can see what happens on the House and Senate floor. So they're basically doing stuff for views, TikTok reels, etc. But the way that we solve shutdowns are not through those conversations. They happen on the back end when people work to cut out deals. Pelosi was quite good at doing this. She's no longer involved at the top level.
Sure.
But there's many, many causes. The point is, what stops the shutdowns from happening? And especially folks from some more remote states that not get as much money, for example, Wyoming has a much lower per capita income, you're going to want to make sure that you get this stuff passed.
Okay, but we can also agree the legislators are not the only ones who are in charge of whether or not a government shutdown happens, yes?
Of course. Let me give an analogy that might clarify. It's true that there's alt causes that always happen. However, if a seatbelt might make it more likely that you survive a car crash, even if there's other causes, probably have the seatbelt.
Okay, and then just one final question. The president, this is just genuinely, I don't know, the president does have to sign off on whatever funding bill happens in order for the shutdown to end, correct?
They can be overturned with supermajorities.
Okay, no further questions, thank you. About 6 minutes. My judges ready?
Yes.
Ian, are you ready?
Yes.
6 minutes starting now. Well, hello. After this round, we'll be officially halfway through. And I'm so excited that I get, again, the honor of debating the legend, Iain Lampert. It's going to be a phenomenal round, Judge. I stand in negation for the resolution Congress's pay should be tied to their performance. Ian's setup and all that framework looks beautiful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit the cardinal sin of the IPDA, and I'm going to flip the flow. I'm going to start with the neg side. What I'm going to show in this next side is that really what we're seeing here is that this whole idea of tying their pay to their performance is really just putting a band-aid on the issue, and it's not addressing the root cause. What's the root cause? The root cause is that congressmen care more about their pay and their power and their position than they do about the people they are representing. And tying their pay to their performance is not going to address that root issue. Contention 1 is appropriate incentives. And this is looking at the idea that congressmen should be in their position for the right reasons. We see that we already have a system in place to ensure that they are. We already have a system in place for if your congressman is making you mad because they're constantly being 100% of the problem when it comes to government shutdowns, you have a protection against that. It's called elections. And the thing is, we need to be using those elections properly to make sure that we have the right people in charge. The subpoint B is people over paychecks. The Congressional Research Service says that the most lawmakers in the 18th and early 19th century could be characterized as citizen legislators, which means that they held a full-time, non-political employment, and then they served in Congress on a part-time basis. What did this help do? This helped make sure that members of Congress were there for the purpose of service, not for the purpose of making money. You're going to see why that matters when I respond to my opponent's case and this idea that they're still going to get to make a good chunk of money even under that plan. So what does this lead to? This leads to contention 2 of the neg counter plan. The neg counter plan is that rather than getting to keep 50% of their pay, which is an insane amount of money, that congressmen will be paid the average, the median wage of whatever district it is that they represent. So that is obviously going to vary from district to district, but across the United States, the average median income, according to Yahoo Finance, for full-time workers is $62,192. That's a whole lot less than that $87,000 that they're going to automatically get to make under the affirmative plan, which means even under the affirmative plan, they still have that motivation of, oh, I get to Congress, and chances are I'm going to make $25,000 more than the average American worker. We're wanting to remove this incentive of money at all. Money should not be a question, should not be the reason that you're in Congress. Your performance should not be tied to money. You should be in Congress because you want to serve your people, and simply tying your money, your salaries, your performance is not going to ensure that. The contention 3 is constituent impact, and subpoint A is altruism, not greed. We want them to be in Congress for the purpose of service, not for the purpose of making money. And subpoint B is better candidates, better results. The ultimate issue here is that we don't have the right people in Congress. And no matter how much you do finagling financially, you're not going to fix that issue. We need to get the right people in Congress. These government shutdowns would not be happening if we had better candidates, better congressmen who actually cared about their people. And the affirmative plan does not solve this root cause. Again, it is just a band-aid trying to make it seem a little bit better. So with all that, let's get to that line-by-line refutation. I can agree with my opponent's contention one of the problem, the fact that Congress is not doing its job. But I'm going to disagree about what the root cause of that is. The root cause is not that they make too much money. The root cause is that they just simply do not care enough about the people that they are representing. If they cared more about the people that they were representing, Congress would have more of an incentive to say, hey, I actually want to serve you well. I want to pass bills that are actually going to help you. So this contention two of the solution, we say, okay, well, you still get to automatically keep $87,000. You still automatically get to make $25,000 more than the average worker in America. That's not going to solve that problem. We're going to say, hey, you do not get to benefit financially at all if you work in Congress. You will make the average, the median salary, wherever it is that you represent. If you are in Congress, you are doing it because you want to serve. You are not doing it because you want to be in some high position of power or make a whole bunch of money. And then contention three of the benefits. My opponent said we're going to stop the pain of shutdowns. So this plan is going to be the solution to shutdowns. And the thing is, I don't think it is, Judge, because again, it doesn't address the root cause. It also doesn't address the fact that shutdowns aren't always entirely in the legislator's control. There's a lot of outside factors, a lot of things such as polarization, which is one thing that my opponent talked about, all of these different things that this plan doesn't really solve for. This plan is just saying like, hey, if you don't get this shutdown ended in 72 hours, then you don't get to make as much money. But it doesn't really address the fact, like, do you actually care about the people that you're representing? Are you actually the proper person to be in Congress right now? So we don't need a plan that's financial finagling. We need a plan which we say, okay, you make the median of the place where you represent, and we as the people should be using our elective power properly to make sure that we have the best candidates, the proper candidates who are going to accomplish things we want them to accomplish in Congress. And for that reason, we feel confident voting for negation.
2 minutes? All good?
Yeah.
Starting time right now. Thank you for that speech, Zoe. I like this counter plan. It's interesting. Is there anywhere in the entire country where the median district level pay is higher than $174,000 per year?
I don't know. I want to say no, but I don't actually know.
I think we can probably agree that the answer is no. That's a lot of money. Is that fair for this round?
Yeah, I'm good with that assumption.
So that means that the negative is saying that we should also reduce congressional pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the negative is affirming the top.
No, I am saying that it's not tied to their performance at all. They just automatically make whatever that money is. We're not considering their performance.
Got it, understood. I've cited some pretty persuasive evidence about how tying things to incentive pay results in a change in action. What precedents can you give me that lowering performance or pay without tying it to performance results in better action? What's the precedent?
Because it means that the people who choose to run for Congress are going to be people that have the proper incentive. It's not going to be people that want to make money.
I get that's the ideal. I'm asking for the precedent. What's the precedent?
I think the precedent is the example I gave of the late 18th and early 19th century, where most legislators were not there as career politicians.
Before they campaigned at all, right?
I think campaigning started in the early 19th.
Yeah. In other words, it's an entirely different system. So maybe in the modern day, could you cite someplace in Singapore, for example, someplace in the UK?
Example, no.
Okay, no modern day examples. I think we're agreed on contention 1 over here.
Mm-hmm.
On contention 2, you're saying that $87,000 is still a lot of money. Right now, folks have to go out of their own budget for things like budgeting, flying around, fundraising, R&D. How are they going to do that if they only have, for example, 30 grand for an entire year?
I mean, they can continue to do fundraising, I suppose. I don't know exactly how they're going to. That would differ from legislator to legislator.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yep.
Minutes?
I'm ready when you are.
Okay. I'm starting right now. I want to thank Zoe for her speech. I want to dive right into it. She opened by saying that it's not about band-aids, it's about root causes. It's better to go with a band-aid that you trust than to just continually bleed out or try a new experimental treatment, which is what her counter plan is. Let's begin with her first argument on the right reasons. I have a huge response to this, which is elections happen once every 6 years. My plan would ensure that multiple times every year there is an accountability metric on Congress to have better legislation done. There is no comparable metric proposed by her plan. She said people over paychecks, but at the point at which she acknowledges in cross-sects that her plan is unbelievably idealistic, in that the last time she can cite something happening is in the 1800s, and nothing from the modern day literally anywhere on the face of the planet, that means that we can't be sure of any link to any impact that's garnered by her plan. It's highly speculative. I appreciate that there's an experimental counter plan, but you gotta give us something so that we're not just voting on maybe it'll be good. We have to root it based on research, and we just don't have that here. Let's go to her counter plan. Look, if you think that the counter plan is a great idea, realize the core of the counter plan is not mutually exclusive to the affirmative case at all, and that's what a counter plan needs to be. In other words, you can decide that it's great to lower their pay based on them failing to perform, move it down to the median, if you think the median is a more useful number, but both of these things can happen at the same time, it still affirms the resolution. Still, prefer the plan over the counter plan because we give a solid incentive period that solves a pressing problem, whereas I think it is too idealistic on the neg side with no research to back it up or any precedent. Her contention 3 is likewise idealistic. She says it's going to be about altruism, not greed, and get better candidates. Notice that no candidates are named, but I'm going to have a huge turn to this. At this point, because so much money is involved in running for Congress in the first place, it means it is more likely that only highly wealthy people get involved with Congress, which means that the Elons and the Warrens of the world, who have an incentive to have business-friendly policies that will help them maintain their money, are more likely to then run instead of someone who says, I'm going to do this because it'll be good for my paycheck and my family, but also because I want to help the world. We live in a capitalist society. Money does matter, period. Let's go back to my case. Contention 1, Congress isn't doing its job. She largely agrees. She says there are other root causes. That's fine. The AFT does a better job of solving the root causes because the negative incentivize only wealthy people to want to run in the first place. Contention 2 is fix the pay problem. I say you can tie it to a very specific benchmarks every single year, and I give you both a study from the UK and California Prop 25 as precedent for how it works. Compare that to the negative case, which typically does not have comparable precedent. Finally, on stop the shutdowns. I show you why stopping the shutdowns are a fantastic idea. Shutdowns are definitely within the control of congressional legislators. They just have to agree on things. It's not like an inevitable weather. That's the reason that it's not happening all the time, just 22 times, which is still far too many. For these reasons, I'll ask for your ballot.
Last time here for me. So again, Judge, thank you for judging. Ian, as always, it's been an excellent debate round. What I'm going to do is I'm going to respond to a couple of specific lines of argumentation on the flow, and then I'm just going to jump into one reason when you go confident voting for negation. Those specific lines of argumentation. He said, in response to my analogy about the Band-Aid, he said it's better that we use a Band-Aid that we trust. And my response is that that's not better than actually addressing the root cause. We don't ever just want to put a Band-Aid on the issue. We want to get to what is the issue. Just putting a Band-Aid on it is honestly us just putting on rose-colored glasses and saying, hey, it's a Band-Aid that we trust, so it's all fine. That's not what we want to do. It's going to lead me to the response to the idea that my plan doesn't have any research attached to it that's incredibly idealistic. And say, here's the thing. Yes, is it currently something that we do here in the United States? No. Do I have any evidence about it used around the world? No, I don't. But I do have the evidence about how it was used in the late 18th and early 19th century, where we knew the lawmakers did care more about their constituents. And we cannot stand here and say that that was a poorer system than what we have here today. And just because I don't have a recent example of it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try it. If we only try things that we have clear-cut evidence and examples and precedents and a wealth of other information about, we'd never have any novel ideas ever. I think that we can try making this happen, this system happen again, because we see that it did work then and it should work now. This is the reason why members of Congress should be in the positions that they are in. It's not to make money, it's because that they want to serve. Now, my opponent said he had this huge turn, this this idea of, well, my plan actually only incentivizes the wealthy to run. Here's the thing, that's actually addressing a different issue about how elections cost an insane amount of money. That's not actually going to be solved under either one of our plans. That's an entirely different issue. System is still going to exist where the wealthy have to run. The problem is that in the affirmative world, those wealthy continue to get wealthier. They go to Congress and they know, hey, even if I'm 100% of the problem, I'm still going to make $25,000 more than the median average salary. Whereas in my plan, we say, hey, the wealthy, they have to consciously say, I am taking a huge paycheck cut in order to be in Congress. So that turn isn't actually as much of a turn as my opponent would want you to believe. His system actually has the wealthy getting wealthier. And also, you can also just have fundraising, any number of other ways you can get to this issue of actually getting elected. In the end, it all comes down to this idea of we want better candidates in Congress. We don't want to hold the hand of the poor candidates and have to do all this finagling to force them to be acceptable. We want to use our elected power in order to get the right people in Congress. And then also finally, this other last line of argumentation I need to respond to is this idea that my plan is not fundamentally any different than the affirmative plan. It is, because the affirmative plan is directly tied to performance. My plan is not tied to performance. You automatically get 100% of this pay, but 100% of this pay is still $25,000 less than the guaranteed amount of pay in the affirmative world, and that is the key difference. It's not going to solve the problem to tie their pay to their performance. We need to look at that root cause, and that brings me down to my first and only voter, this two-world analysis. What happens in the affirmative world versus the neg world? In the aff world, we're still bleeding. We just have a Band-Aid over it. There's no actually addressing of that root cause of the incentives for why you're in Congress. In the neg world, we say, hey, we're gonna do a little bit of surgery here. It's gonna be a little bit invasive. It might even be a little bit a huge change from what we're currently doing, but it's going to address that root cause. So maybe we'll stop bleeding. So that instead of just helping our limping congressmen get through the government shutdowns, we'll say, hey, if you can't handle being in Congress without us having to force you to do your job, then maybe you shouldn't be in Congress. And maybe if the reason that you're in Congress is because you want to make all this money, we're going to take that away from you. We're going to say, hey, the only people who are in Congress are people who actually want to serve, who are willing to take the huge pay cut, who are willing to put themselves on equal ground as their constituents and then do their job. And for that reason, we can see that tying pay to performance is not a good plan. We should go with the neg plan, and therefore you can vote for the negation. Thank you.
Whenever you're good.
Yes.
Last speech start now. Thank you so much for judging. I think it's been a good one. And now I'm going to break this down with first a response to the two-world analysis, and then 5 reasons to prefer the plan over the counterplan. And start with the two-world analysis. So it gives you rhetoric about how we are still bleeding in the affirmative world. Not true. We can put on known band-aids that will clearly create the incentive to stop the bleeding that's happening in so many government-funded institutions. In the neg world, we do not know what happens. There is an agreement that there is no evidence and there is no precedent for doing this beyond something that might have been the case hundreds of years ago. With respect to Zoe, trust me, bro, is not sufficient for a counterplan. You need far more specific analysis if you have to make that comparison directly. This is IPDA, it is not IP speech A. So let's get that evidence there. Let's hold the negative to their standard because they're the ones who chose this counterplan. Why is the plan better? 5 distinct reasons, all of which can be voting issues. The first, there are far more specific incentives. Again, far more specific incentives. Zoe has conceded the analysis I gave you from the study of office accountability in the UK, looking at 1,400 offices, indicating a 21% increase in productivity. She has also conceded the California switch, from missing deadlines 30 years in a row to never missing any deadlines since. Those are far more specific. Weigh that against the negatives counterplan, which does not give you those specifics. What is the second reason to prefer? And that is better precedent. Again, better precedent. Zoe had 30 minutes to find any precedent of this working anywhere in the world in the last 50, 60, 70 years. That was not ever delivered to you. I would respectfully ask you not to do that work for her, because that does not exist in today's round. But she has not challenged the precedent that came to you from the affirmative side. Let's go to voting issue number 3. Incentivize the very wealthy one. Again, the very wealthy to run. while she says that they're going to be held to the cost of living of their district, as she's conceded in Cross, DC is incredibly expensive. It is one of the most expensive places in the entire states. What might work for you in Wyoming does not work for you in Washington, D.C., meaning they would be spending their time fundraising unless they were already super wealthy just to be able to live and eat in that area, which means you're taking away more focus from their ability to solve actual problems, meaning there is more bleeding. The fourth reason to prefer is that truly her system is not mutually exclusive. It's not mutually exclusive to say we can reduce your pay to the cost of living in your district, if case judge you think that's a good idea, based on if you're able to pass these shutdown budgets. That could be the best of both worlds if you happen to like her counterclaim. But the final reason to affirm is clear solvency versus unclear solvency. I've given you some very clear solvency about how this directly stops shutdowns. This came in my third contention, and I gave a bunch of examples of how terrible it is. Zoe does not. So therefore, while I thank you for your advocacy, and I thank you for your time, I'm going to ask you for an affirmation ballot. Thank you. Fair round.
Thank you.